Hi, and welcome to another episode of Can't Stop the Growth. I'm your host, Chad Peterman, and today we're going to take a look at part 2 of a talk I did on leadership blind spots, where we talk about the 6 most common blind spots that are out there for leaders. A lot of this content was taken from John Maxwell and his podcast, which I listened to, and then kind of took his 6 blind spots and kind of related them to what we're doing here at Peterman Heating, Cooling, and Plumbing. So, without further ado, we'll take a look at part 2 of this portion of a meeting we had with our future leaders here at Peterman Heating, Cooling, and Plumbing. Hope you enjoy.
You know, the one thing that, as I talk about kind of my personal stuff, I was looking through my notes, and so that was the first page. A lot of stuff on there. I'm not actually sure how I navigated that scribbledness there just a second ago, but it was successful. I hope. I flipped the page this morning and I was like, ooh, that's a tough one. And I started to think about, well, this is in a business setting. I started to think about my personal life too. And this has been something for me recently that's kind of come up as just things of, diving into things and just seeing things from different perspectives. And I said to myself, or I wrote at the top of the page the other day, I said, what if I use the question in my marriage with my wife, what am I missing? And I was like, well, that's powerful at work. That could be super powerful at home. My wife and I are like, we're on the disc profile, we're on the opposite spectrums here. And I have learned over the years that I'm not a very good listener. Listening is key, and our perspectives are entirely different, which is great. And ultimately, I think it leads to some really good things, but understanding the kind of connectedness of that. You know, a marriage is a relationship. You're trying to, while there aren't concrete goals, the goal is to, love and support one another. Well, how do we do that best? And I think that there's a connection between what we do here at work is ultimately, while it's a different kind of love, it's that care for another. It's that willingness to want that person to grow. And how do we do that? Well, we do that by understanding where they're coming from. Showing them that we do care what their perspective is. I'm really good at giving my perspective, saying what should be done. I'm also really good at getting frustrated, saying the thing which I'm sure we've all said to ourselves at the time, doesn't she understand that all of this is going on? Like, what don't they get? Like, come on. And taking a step back after listening to this and understanding, well, maybe they have a different perspective. Maybe they're not thinking that at all. And that's okay. They don't need to be thinking that at all. And, it's, I think it correlates to something I said, I think a couple of weeks ago, is, asking ourselves, the what am I missing, but also the question, what is it like to be on the other side of me? And obviously in a marriage, that's critical. What's it like to be on the other side of me? And also in leadership, what is it like to be on the other side of me? Do my people know that I'm open to their suggestions, open to their ideas, open to their perspective, open to maybe doing it a little bit differently than I first intended? Really open to spending the time with them that it's going to take. Sometimes I hear from, well, we told them what to do. Great. Obviously, we need to ask them more questions. We need to find out why they don't want to do it or why they are not currently doing it. And a lot of times what I found out is it is the uncovering of the perspective is uncovering that, oh, well, I didn't even know A, B, and C happened over here on the back end. Well, that makes sense. I get why you were telling us to do that. And there's tougher ones. There's ones where we may explain on the backside what A, B, and C do and how your inaction or your unwillingness to follow something, like we've explained this whole thing. Like we get it. Like the whole thing has been explained. We've explained it numerous times. But yet still, how do we understand where they're coming? They're still coming from somewhere where whatever we're doing is not connecting. And the one question I kind of came up with is, in order to kind of uncover that, is, I feel like I'm missing something. Admitting that I am missing something. I'm missing something here because we've explained this whole thing, and to me it makes perfect sense, but maybe to you it doesn't, and I'd like to learn more about that. Why doesn't that process make sense to you at this current time? It's not a bad thing. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe there is a piece in here that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. We had a conversation like this earlier this week where it was like, well, we laid out the process and it wasn't being followed, and it's like, well, why in the heck isn't it being followed? And then you start to dig in, you're like, oh crap, I guess we kind of overlooked that piece. I wonder how we could work to get rid of that or find a solution. And a lot of that's just asking questions. Well, let's ask some questions of both sides. Let's figure out, hey, what are your ideas? What do you think? What do you think from your side? And just really working at it together to come up with something. I mean, we'd probably all agree that no one, very few, do things intentionally wrong. Like it may appear that they did, like you intentionally didn't follow that. However, there's a reason why they intentionally did it that way. Not wrong, they did it that way. Well, they did it that way because of their perspective, where they're coming from. Now, we may have to work to understand that perspective. It may not make sense right off the bat to us, which again is okay. There's no right or wrong perspective. There's just different ones. Now we got to figure out how we can do it right, not be right. He talks about, in here, he talks about some of the kind of the 6 characteristics, the 6 common blind spots, and where those show up in most leaders. And so I'll kind of run through kind of these 6 here that he pointed out and touch on a few of them. We've already kind of alluded to a lot of them, but the first one, and he says is what is the most common blind spot, is that singular perspective. He makes the analogy or quotes if the only tool you have is a hammer, you tend to see everything as a nail. I would say I'm fairly guilty of that. I don't think that there is anything that cannot be solved by a process, flowchart, bulleted list of some sort. That just really gets me excited. When we got a whole process just outlined to the T, we've thought of everything, it just flows. And that is my singular perspective. I've gotten better, but if you want to excite me, you just give me a bulleted list, and we're gonna go to town on that. We can cross things off. It's just gonna be wonderful. But understanding that everybody doesn't think like that. Not everybody learns like that. Not everybody processes information like that. And so I've worked to really open my ears and listen and ask people what works for you, you know. And what I found is that sometimes that doesn't necessarily work for me, but knowing that it works for them makes it work for me a little bit better. It's not easy. It's not how I want to process it, but knowing that it works for them and knowing that that may allow them to grow or allow them to process it easier, that makes it okay. I'm good with that. And he talks about, leaders are outward focused while followers are inward focused. And, understanding as a leader that every action that you have, everything you do, how you wake up in the morning, how you talk to the team, how you conduct a meeting, all of that has an impact on those that you're leading. That may sound like a lot of pressure. However, what I found is if you're coming from the right place, if you have the right intent, and what helps that is stating it so that everybody's on the same page at the outset of a meeting, at the outset of a new process that we're going to undertake. This is the intent of this. This is the problem that we're trying to solve. If at some point it doesn't solve that problem or there's a better solution, please let us know. And we have to understand that an inward focus is, understanding how this may affect me, how I may be affected by this change, how this may be a little bit harder for me to process if we do it that way. However, if the team sees this as the best way forward, then maybe I just need to adapt. Maybe I need to be a little bit more flexible. The second one that he talks about is insecurity. That leader who has that blind spot of insecurity is the one that's needing the credit. They have a hard time giving credit to anybody. They feel threatened by the growth of others. They're always asking the questions, how did it affect me? How are they going to view me? How did I do in this certain situation? They're constantly doing those inward checks of, hey, I'm going to do this, but how are they gonna take me? Or, if someone else does something and it impedes on my turf a little bit, do I feel threatened by that? Am I, oh my God, why would I get mad at that person? Why would you, do something or is it more so, oh, that's a different way of looking at it. Yeah. Maybe I'll have a conversation with them and just say, hey, I saw that you did that. What, if you don't mind, what were you, I wouldn't have done it that way, but what were you thinking? Because I feel like maybe I may have the wrong perspective. Maybe I have a wrong idea because, this looks like it would be decent. I wouldn't have done it that way, which is okay. That's healthy conflict. That's having a conversation. And so insecurity, I think, is something we probably all deal with. Everybody, hey, how am I perceived? How do I come off? And I think we have to understand that, we can provide security for ourselves by providing security with others. The more security we provide them, which comes in the form of feedback, which comes in the form of questioning, understanding their perspective is wanted, coming from that place allows us to get over that hurdle of insecurity. The third one that he talks about is that a common blind spot is when a leader devalues people. And so this one, when I first heard it, I was like, devalue people. I don't know about that. And then I got to thinking, how do we, I think the thing that pops to mind immediately is like devaluing people, like putting someone down or like talking bad about them or something like that. But could devaluing people be looked at as not spending the time with them that they need to grow? As a leader, we're in charge of their growth. So if we don't spend the time with them, are we in essence devaluing them? Potentially. Something to think about. Do we devalue them by not gaining their perspective? By not asking the right questions? Again, potentially. That may not be your intent. I don't want to devalue this person. I respect him. Great person. Good kid. Has a lot of potential. But if we don't spend the time with them, do we truly value what they could become? The fourth one he talks about is an ego out of control. The biggest mistake of a leader is not admitting that you made a mistake. This is a tough one. As a leader, you want to put up that united front and, hey, I know all the answers and I've got all the answers and come to me because I'll tell you how to do it. But the power that is garnered in admitting that you made a mistake, what do you have to lose? Who cares? Everyone makes them, right? Everybody says that. Everybody makes mistakes. Well, if they do, then what are you worried about? You'll make far less mistakes if you allow those on your team to lead themselves, to think for themselves. Because more than likely, they're going to come up with a plan, and you just have to support them. And if the plan takes a wrong turn, so be it. Hey, no worries. How can we correct that? Where can we get a little better? To me, that goes back to pride is concerned about who's right. Humility is about what's right. We don't need to be right. And being right is not always coming up with a plan. Being right can sometimes just be a failure to listen. When we don't give people the opportunity to speak their perspective or give them the platform to learn, that can sometimes put us in a place of really exhibiting that pride, really wanting to be right, because we never gave ourselves or our team the opportunity to potentially prove us wrong. I think this can also show up in a number of different ways. Ego can be shown in a failure to change. Well, the way we're doing it works just fine. Yes, it may. But would it hurt to try it a different way? Even if we find out that way doesn't work, we could always revert back. Lucky for us here, we don't make a whole lot of life or death decisions. Yeah. We make a lot of decisions that we can really collaborate on. That's the best part about what we do. The fifth one that he talks about is a blind spot of the lack of character. He talks about how character protects talent. So while we're always working to increase our talent, become better at what we do, the ultimate protector of that talent is indeed character. Character doesn't make you a great leader, it only protects it. And I think this just goes back to your people are going to act and do as you do. You operate with integrity. Are you truthful? Are you honest? Are you looking out for others? What is your character? To me, this is something that I've been taught and harped on just so fortunate to have so many influences early in my life and still continue throughout my life of people who put an emphasis on character. I think that's one of the greatest things that I learned from from high school athletics was character. The whole, if whether you win or lose, you shake the other team's hand, you're good sports, you're taking care of others, you're working as a team. All of those things to me build character, and why I love sports to this day, and have always been glued to them since I think I started playing when I was 5, some sort of sport. So that is key, and I think sometimes goes without saying, but it's easy to get out of character sometimes when situations arise, or people may not think like we think, or want to do things like we want to do. Not that we're going to go commit a crime, but if we truly do care about people, are we willing to listen to their perspective? There again, it's not that you don't care about people if you don't, but do you truly care about people if you're open and willing to listen? And the last one that he talks about is living in our weak zone instead of our strength zone. And so this one, he talks a little bit about, understanding what our strengths are as people. Because, as he says, you can be intuitive in your strength zone. In your weak zone, it's very difficult to be intuitive. One of my strengths is I can see things into the future. Not that I can tell the future, don't take me like that, but I'm very good at being able to see kind of how it all goes together and piecing it all together in my mind. But there are things that I'm not so good at. That acknowledging, understanding that I'm not great at those, allows me to bring on other people who are really good at that. Or, hey, you handle that because I'm not great at it. Or having a willingness to potentially improve on one of those, knowing that it is a weakness. And I think sometimes once we know that we have a weakness, we sometimes want to overcompensate rather than learn from that weakness, rather than let somebody else teach us about that weakness. Goes back to that flexibility. If we have a weakness, acknowledging it and then allowing others to help us, whether that comes in the form of doing a task that you're not great at, or whether it comes in helping you gain a better perspective on that weakness that you have. And so I think all of that stuff is extremely important. So again, just to recap, the 6 most common blind spots: the singular perspective, insecurity, devaluing people, an ego out of control, lack of character, and living in our weak zone instead of our strength zone. As I said at the beginning, blind spots are very, very difficult for you to see. What I have found, and I think Maxwell iterates in his teaching, is that we have to be open to understanding we have them, being flexible to learn, and then providing action to that learning. To me, that's the key. I think if we leave here today, we all probably understand that we have them. There's probably a willingness to address it in some form or fashion. Now, what do those actions look like? I can tell you mine, where I feel like I can get better, is in some of the meetings that I have, stating the intention of the meeting. Everyone's been in that meeting that gets off the rails real quick. And then we're like, it's been an hour. What have we done? Nothing. We've talked about a lot of stuff, but we leave the meeting with no action. To me, that's the other thing. I was on a call with a guy who I really respect. He runs a company out in Kansas City. And, we ended our call on Wednesday. As we were getting off the call, we scheduled our next one for next month. And he said, all right, as I understand, my action items are this, this, and this. And I was like, well, just learned something there at the end that I think may be more powerful than the, plumbing labor issue that we had at the beginning of the call. To me, those are the two things that I think I can really improve on is stating intention, what do we want to accomplish, and then at the end, okay, what are our action items? What are you going to do? What am I going to do? Let's go do those so that the next time we meet, we've got some stuff accomplished. We're putting action to what we're doing.